No, Cookie, I don't care if those are your people. We're not making Rich Men North of Richmond the official song of the book club, okay? Thank you. Oh, hey everybody. Welcome to JL's Book Club, episode whatever, where we don't talk about Fight Club because I didn't read Fight Club. As always, every month we are sponsored by a beverage, and this month it is Prosecco, because it was in our fridge and I don't think it's been a sponsor yet. So, Prosecco. When you want champagne but can't afford the French stuff, Prosecco. Now, last month, I pride myself, much like the Trump administration, on promises made, promises kept. I promised 3 books would potentially be reviewed this month. I only finished one of them, and I finished the one book I was reading this month about 25 minutes ago. Okay, so this is breaking book review news. Now, one of the reasons I didn't read as much this month was the book I am going to review today was I don't want to say a labor, because that would make you feel like it was a negative, but it was work getting through. So I was unable to get to the other 2 books that I wanted to review. And also, I watched a lot more content and did a little more working out. And as I've said on the podcast before, if you listen, which I know you don't, I said there are 4 things I like to do with my spare time, and I generally only have the ability to do 2 of them. Work out, read, play video games, watch content. Now, the watching of content has greatly expanded, and thankfully, for all of the 19 of you watching this, I got laid off in June, so that kind of expanded my reach to maybe get into a 3rd area. So we've got working out, we've got content, but the other 2, video games, still not playing, okay? Maybe I'm not officially retired from video game playing. And then reading. Reading took a hit this month, but I anticipate September and October, a lot of travel. I'll be right back in there getting many books read for you, like you care. So the book review this month, and I've yet to say week, so that's pretty good. The book review this month is An Immense World by Ed Yong. It was a New York Times, here's a little story about this. The final chapter of this book was an article in, I think, The Atlantic, maybe The New Yorker. One of those 2 very intellectual hoity-toity magazines that I subscribe to. Although my mailman, I think, has been stealing my New Yorker from time to time. So how about that? I'm in the one place on earth where the mailmen are like, birthday cards with money? No. Adult content? No. New Yorker? Yep, this guy will never know it's missing. So it was an article adapted from the final chapter, or most of the final chapter of this book, in either the New Yorker or the Atlantic, like a year ago when the book came out. And by the way, good news for people if you are interested in this book when I'm done. It comes out on paperback this week. So you don't have to get the fancy, expensive edition like I did, since I love books so much. You'll be able to buy the paperback edition. Look at that, getting the paperback bump for it may be an immense world, but in the book world, it's also a small world. So I got about halfway through the article in the New Yorker or Atlantic. Let's just call it the Atlanticer with a hard R. We'll combine the 2 magazines. But halfway through I quit on the article. I was like, that's kind of long. I'm good. But then the New York Times, at the end of 2022, had it as one of their top 10 books of the year, a very prestigious list. And being a pretentious lib-cuck douche that I am, I was like, oh, well, if it's on the New York Times top 10, well, then I've got to read it, even though I couldn't make it through the entire article in the Atlanticer. So, got the book, read it, took me all month. It's a very good book, so you weren't expecting that. It took me a long time. Now, the other book that I've reviewed for long-time Patreon fans, that we've been doing this a year and a half, what was it called again? Black Wolf, Blood Cum or something? The fantasy book I read, Red Wolf, Grey Douche, or whatever, like Marlon James's critically acclaimed fantasy nonsense. Red Wolf, Grey, I threw the book out, by the way, I never do that, but I was like clearing up some shelf space and I said, not sure I need this one, buddy. So hopefully that book is, raping a rat in a garbage dump somewhere. So the point is that book took me an incredibly long time to read because it was arduous. It was not as pleasurable a read as I thought from like sort of a critically acclaimed fiction fantasy book. This took a long time because it's steeped in a lot of science. Now some chapters go by quicker. Basically, just broad summary. The book is basically just, the subtitle of it is How Animal Senses Reveal the Hidden Realms Around Us. So it goes through, obviously, sentences like touch and sight and hearing, but also other more advanced things like echolocation, prominent among bats. Just different things, pain, how different animals sense pain, smell, all these things. And there's like a cumulative effect to the book as I'm reading it. Some chapters, none of the chapters really breeze by because my one real critique of this sounds nitpicky, but I don't think it is. A lot of fucking footnotes, Ed Yong, okay? Tone it down with the footnotes. Every page, 3 footnotes. And some of them are like elaborating on the content, and others are just him being snarky or just sharing a tidbit. And I'm like, footnotes really fuck up your flow reading, you know? So when it's a dense book, you're like, da, 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 and then it's a footnote like tiny print like this, and you're like, and then you forget, and you're like, you move on to the next page because the footnote's at the bottom. I'm like, oh no, that footnote was from the top of the page back over here. So logistically, it was a slower read because of that. The vision chapter is the one I would say is the most akin to high school physics. Physics of the 3 sciences I took in high school, chemistry I was the best at, biology I was very good at, physics I was like, I mean, there's nothing I really do that I'm average at, but for me, I guess that was the most. I was closest to my peers in my physics, like a B+ in physics, and I was like, see, I'm not perfect. But a lot of talk, like where I was like, I'm so far removed from science classes that some of the chapters, like the vision one, I was like reading it really slowly because I'm like, well, if I'm reading the book, I might as well read it. Why skim? Just don't fucking read the book. Do what you did with the Atlanticer or the New Yorkic. We'll call it the New Yorkic. The hybrid magazine. Probably one day that will happen. You know, that nobody will be reading and they'll be like, we have 9 subscribers left. We decided to combine the Atlantic, New York magazine, the New Yorker, and the Economist into one magazine called Pretentious Fuck You. And a lot of curses. Sorry, Cookie. Sorry, cinematographer. But no noise, please. Don't hit the pillow. That throws everybody off. But that chapter is an example I give you of one that took me a long time because I was like, eventually you're just like, okay, I'm not going to fully grasp how the eyeball and vision works. But a lot of the chapters, like I said, the cumulative effect of the book is that you start to really just walk around and start to go, wow, there is a lot more to the world. And not, it gets to the bones of it, not in sort of a platitude like, wow, what a wonderful world, but you start to really like look at things differently. And I think that's the strength of the book. It's an undeniable impact of the book that you just start learning about like, wow, these creatures, this is amazing. What bugs do, what fish you'll never see do, what birds do, what random animals that you don't really know what they are, but then, you know, it's the cumulative impact of this book is you really start to look around and go, wow, there's like more to, like everything has its own world and everything, you know. I know I always say this, but at some point in my life, I'm going to go vegan. I just know I'm going to head that way eventually. And I don't know if then that makes me part of the LGBTQ community according to conservatives. But reading this book only enhances that. And I thought the chapter on bats, it's not a chapter on bats, but it's about echolocation. You know, you read bats and it's like, no wonder they have diseases that can kill us. In some ways, they feel almost like even though they're small and we can fuck them up, they almost seem like, in some ways, a more advanced creature. So it would make sense that they could harbor diseases that could kill us, but not them. That's just my editorializing. That's not that part is not in the book. But I found myself like with these spotted lanternflies in New Jersey. We managed to really holocaust the shit out of them last year because they were everywhere, and now you just see a few. Whereas they're proliferating up where my mom lives in the Bronx. So I guess we basically gentrified them out. They were like, get out of our nice Jersey towns, go to the Bronx, you filthy spotted lanternflies. But now I see them, and I was stomping these things, like nonstop last year, and now when I see them, I just walk around them. And I'm like, I know I'm supposed to kill them because they're harmful for trees, but after reading this book, I'm like, I'm either becoming a more holistic, better person or a total pussy. One or the other. That's what this book will do to you. I don't know which. It can affect everybody differently. Maybe I'm both. Look at that. I identify as both. I'm a better pussy now. We're combining things on today's episode. But I'll read 2 quick passages from this just to give you a flavor of the book. But I think if you are a science person, some guy next to me in Starbucks said, how is that book? And I was like, sir, I don't swing that way. I always find people asking me about books. Is that new gay code? I don't know. But it's always like, yes, it's fine. But he was like, oh, because I really like science. I said to him, I was like, it's good. In some parts it gets very science-y, which as we know is the adjective for science. And he said, oh, well, I like science. And I was like, once again, I don't go that way, dude. But whenever somebody says I like science, I'm always like, yeah, I like science too. But this shit gets pretty deep. Now, are you saying you like learning about things? Or are you saying, no, I like the physics of the eyeball? Because some of these chapters may lose you, bro. So don't try to one-up me when I'm the one reading the book that, oh, I like science. Okay, we'll see. We'll see when you're done with this book how much you like science. But if you were a science lover or somebody steeped in science, I don't think there's any way you won't like this book. If you aren't, but somebody who is very curious and finds at least my summary of this book mildly interesting, you might still like it. Sometimes, that's what I'm trying to do, by the way, with the book club, is like not every book. I don't want every book to be just something where I go, I'm going to love this and read it quickly. Some things I want, whether it's science or fiction or science fiction. I want sometimes to challenge my brain in a different way so that I either with fiction have to imagine things. Even with that book, red scumbag, gray asshole. I wanted to read that because I was like, well, I want to read because it's got to trigger my brain in a different way than just reading things I'm very familiar with. So just as a mental exercise. So this, I don't want to say it's like challenging, like you won't know what's going on. First of all, skip most of his footnotes. That'll speed up the reading process. Just fuck the footnotes. If it was so important, Ed Yong, it'd be in the main text. Okay, so it's a 350-page book with at least 270 to 300 footnotes. So skip the footnotes. That'll speed up your reading process. And you know what? Maybe you don't get everything in terms of the nitty-gritty science, but a lot of it is very interesting. The anecdotes are very interesting. So let's go 2 quick passages to give you a flavor of the book. This is just a footnote, and it spoke to me. I felt seen, and I think you'll know why when I read it. The footnote, as I was just telling you to skip the footnote, so I'm reading you my favorite footnote from the book. He says, octopuses, cuttlefish, and other cephalopods have photoreceptors dotted throughout their skin, which might help to control their amazing color-changing abilities. Asterisk, that means footnote. Now I'm going to read it in as JL snarky a tone as possible, because that's what Ed Yong was definitely conveying. There's always at least one person who writes in with a pompous and incorrect corrective, so let's get this out of the way. The word octopus is derived from Greek and not Latin, so the correct plural is not octopi. Technically, the formal plural would be octopodes, pronounced octopodes. Ooh, I pronounced it wrong. But octopuses will do. Now, the lady, the cinematographer lady is laughing because she goes, yeah, you would like that, you dick. That's what I mean, has any author ever had a footnote in a science book more on brand for J.L. Cauvin than that? Let me anticipate all you asshole fans and readers with your bullshit and shut it down. So, Ed Yong, you had a fan right there with that footnote. And then just a paragraph from the final chapter, which I probably was in the New Yorker or Atlantic or Economist or National Geographic article. We normalize the abnormal we being humans. We normalize the abnormal and accept the unacceptable. Remember that more than 80% of people live under light-polluted skies and that 2/3 of Europeans are immersed in noise equivalent to constant rainfall. Many people have no idea what true darkness or quiet feels like. Oh, I know what true darkness is. Within that inexperience, vicious cycles begin to spin. As we desecrate sensory environments, we become accustomed to the results. As we push animals away, we get used to their absence. As the problems of sensory pollution grows, our willingness to address it subsides. How do we solve a problem that we don't realize exists? Well, Ed Yong, my friend, after spending a month with you, we don't. We are done as a species. We are just going to continue to degrade and destroy the planet and species and whatnot. But I think your book, I think this book is, I understand why it was acclaimed, and people with a better grasp of some of the complicated science probably love it even more. I liked it, and I think it's the book I would describe as almost this, although there are fun anecdotes and fun footnotes, few and far between in terms of the footnotes, but the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. By the end of the book, you are thinking about nature and the world differently, and creatures and what's out there. And I think that's the first step to maybe being better stewards of the environment than we are, and we are horrible stewards of the environment. So this is like a cautionary thumbs up, and I think I've been even-handed and honest. Like, I'm glad I read it, unlike Gray Jizz Blood Ass, that fantasy book from episode 3. Seriously, go check out episode 3, and the first 11 episodes are now on YouTube, so if you don't want to scroll through your Patreon feed. This is a book I'm glad I read. It wasn't always easy to read, but I'm glad I read it. So, and it's on paperback, I believe, this week. It comes out on paperback, so I don't know. Do what you will. 17 people still watching. Do with this what you will. Now, next month, I'm recommitting to reading multiple books, and it's fiction month. It's September. It's fiction month. Back to school, everybody. I don't know. They read nonfiction in school. I don't know why fiction has to be part of school thing. But first book. These are 3 books that had good reviews over the last year in the New York Times Book Review. Okay. Chain Gang All-Stars will be the first one up. So you're definitely getting a review of this in case I read slowly or have some cognitive impairment this month. Chain Gang All-Stars, it's basically a dystopian, I think it's like a dystopian future book where there is, as far as I remember from the review when I bought it, basically like a prison fight club that's like televised, and I think it's fights to the death. You know, it's social commentary, and also probably feels a little bit like something that might get made into a Netflix series. When the strike is over, I stand with SAG and Wooga. The next one is called The Boys by Katie Hafner. This is one of these books that didn't get any attention, but the review in the Times was very good, and I said, you know what? Once in a while, I like to take the JL clout, the JL influencer, if you will, and say, hey, author that not a lot of people are talking about, Times talked about you. Well, now you're going to get an even bigger bump than the New York Times, because the JL Book Club is going to read you. So that'll be next. And then Small Mercies by Dennis Lehane, and he's a well-known fiction writer. I believe he's among his books is Gone Baby Gone. So this is, I think, a fiction book that takes place during like the busing era in Boston. So you know there's going to be a lot of racism, but without hard R's, not by choice, but by diction. So yeah, it should be a chock-full book review next month with a lot of fiction. And hopefully I like all of them, but I'll give you the honest truth if I don't like them. Okay, that's what you come here for. All 12 of you still watching. So thank you for joining me again for JL's book club, and thank you any new patrons who are getting into the book reviews. So that's it for this month. So as always, books, they're like documentaries for smart people.